If you're into gaming, you probably come across a franchise that expanded its universe into movies or TV shows. That's something pretty common, even today. But believe me, adapting a game's story can be just as hard, or honestly even harder, than adapting a comic book. And that's exactly why some adaptations ended up becoming total disasters, traumatizing both the fans and even the actors involved. But let's leave those atrocities behind and focus what really matters now. It was announced during the League of Legends 10-year anniversary event, and it was originally planned to drop in 2020, but it got pushed back to 2021 because of the pandemic. And honestly, the wait was totally worth it, since the show was praised not only by the League community itself, but also by a huge new audience that got super drawn into the world of Runeterra. Arcane got nominated for 43 awards, and it actually won 33 of them. It basically became this reference point, like an inspiration for other productions, and it turned into a milestone in the industry. Even 10 or 20 years from now, its name is still going to be brought up a lot. And yeah, even though a lot of people threw some heavy criticism at it, especially the second season, you just can't deny it, guys. Riot is straight up Riot's absolute cinema. I even heard about people using Powder and Jinx as case studies in psychology college papers. With the end of the show, the big question was what Riot's next step was going to be. Honestly though, if you already had a decent grasp of the lore, you kinda knew it was going to be Nexus. Either way, according to Christian Link, co-creator and showrunner of Arcane, a bunch of products were born from the series and are still in development, but nothing's in full production yet. That's when a bunch of news sites started talking about a leak, saying that a leaker, apparently the same one who dropped those episodes of the second season, claimed that the name of the next series would be Iron and Chains. The story was supposed to continue from that cinematic Welcome to Nexus, the one we got earlier this year. According to the info, and also a lot of fan speculation, Swain would finally make his appearance. It's not a coincidence that his Raven shows up in Arcane, and supposedly, he'd become like a mentor to Mel, the main protagonist, teaching her how to deal better with the threat of LeBlanc. Probably just a part of Swain's plan to get a strong ally by his side in this constant power and influence struggle going on in Nexus. In that same interview with the series developers, they said that Mel and the whole Medarda family would be really important in future events. But going back to the leaks, they also said that the Immortal Bastion and Mordekaiser would play big roles in that story. He's the GOAT, right? The dude is basically Nexus itself in villain form. They also mentioned that Mbessa would be back, but only in Mel's flashbacks. Maybe she'd show up as some kind of hallucination or vision, kinda like how Silco appears to Jinx when she's depressed after Isha's death. I feel like this totally matches with the interview we had with the developers. If these leaks are actually true, we're gonna be in for a super interesting story. Specifically, I'm talking about the way that Riot's been building up LeBlanc lately. We don't really know her true intentions, the full extent of her knowledge and power, and her origin. Of course, her mystique is a big part of her signature charm, but it'd still be nice to get at least some of those answers. I think Riot might even use something that was established in LeBlanc's second lore description. Back then, her real name was Yvain, and the mantle of Emilia LeBlanc was passed down to her descendants, whose bodies were eventually taken over by LeBlanc, letting the same matron keep on living through this endless cycle of renewal. She's basically a mix between Orochimaru from Naruto and Marquis Rosewall from Re:Zero. I also feel like I should mention her interactions with Vygar and Jarvan IV, which just made things really weird and confusing.
Tell me, Jarvan, what do you remember of your mother? Ah, the young prince. You have your father's eyes. A tasteless homage to an unworthy role model, Vhagar. Sleep now, little one. I will not give up on you.
Who knows, maybe Riot could actually show us how Vygar and LeBlanc first met, the period of servitude they both went through under Mordekaiser's reign, and show LeBlanc leaving behind her manipulation and ambition to actually care and feel compassion for another being. Wait, maybe Riot could use this story to confirm or deny that one theory about LeBlanc and Jarvan IV. Basically, the idea is that one of LeBlanc's clones went down a different path from the others, took on the identity of Catherine's spirit might, got involved with Jarvan III, gave birth to Jarvan IV, and then was either killed by the real LeBlanc or faked her own death for some bigger reason. It's always been a bit of a conspiracy theory, but it would be a really interesting thing for Riot to dive into. Another thing Riot could finally put on the screen is some parts of the first great invasion of Ionia, and maybe some parts of the second one. Like, what exactly pushed Swain to start this new campaign? In the cinematic, A Dark Path, Vladimir himself says that the new general of Nexus would never approve another march on Ionian soil. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. But while we wait for that moment to come, maybe you'd consider us us helping wait it out, and drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you're feeling generous, consider becoming a member or checking out our store for some League-themed products. It really helps. If Arcane is one of the names I talk about the most here on the channel, the Ezreal solo series isn't that far behind. My obsession with this series all started when Riot stopped creating short stories. I mean the narrative ones that dived into the champions, the regions, or went into the past and present events. A Runeterra fan artist named Papa Chokol made a post on Twitter saying that the lore fans shouldn't be sad about the end, but instead be happy that those stories happened, and he invited people to share their favorites. In response to that, another user called CEO Traveling Stars, who judging by the profile picture was clearly a huge Ezreal fan, said that all of the Ezreal stories gave him a personality and space to explore his growth, but Riot never actually followed up on that. That's when Matthew Foshizzle Dunn, who used to be a senior narrative writer at Riot, spoke up. And I said used to because he got fired, along with a bunch of other people when Riot did a massive purge on the narrative department. This guy wrote a ton of amazing short stories, plus champion bios. Anyways, he mentioned that he had a bunch of more stories planned for Ezreal. Actually, he had about a dozen pitches for different stories, but Riot didn't want them, just like they didn't want Matt himself. He even took the chance to throw some shade at the company for the unfair way he was let go. He explained that Riot fired him even though his wife had just been diagnosed with cancer, and his dad had recently passed away from COVID. His supervisor apparently even fought with upper management so he wouldn't be laid off, but that decision had already been made, since in Riot's eyes, anything related to the lore was disposable. Let's be real for a sec, guys. A lot of people might think that Matt was just playing the victim or exaggerating, but the truth is that most companies don't really care about what's happening in their employees' personal lives. Plus, the last part of what Matt said is totally legit. Riot basically threw away like 90% of the established canon because of Arcane, which was supposed to be a parallel universe, kind of like how Marvel's MCU is separate from the comics. Not gonna lie, it was a pretty stupid decision. They could have just kept things the way they were, because making Arcane the new official timeline was never gonna magically boost profits. On the contrary, it only caused headaches for the whole community and for a few writers still left at the company. But anyway, going back to the main topic, one of Matthew's ideas was actually pitched for a 7-season Ezreal series, with a character arc similar to Jimmy McGill in Better Call Saul. For those of you who don't know, he's the lawyer from Breaking Bad, who got his own spin-off show exploring his past. Matt also revealed that he'd been working on that concept for years. That's when the conversation continued between him and this fan, who once again said Ezreal really deserved to have an arc like that in his story. Matthew agreed, saying that his whole goal and the goal of others was to give Ezreal a proper arc, but Riot was super resistant when it came to hearing and greenlighting proposals from their internal writers. He even pointed out himself that it was a miracle Arcane ever got produced in the first place. He also leaked a bunch of info about this project, starting with Ezreal's backstory. Unfortunately, even though Ezreal's parents loved him, they loved exploring even more. They'd actually intended to return to their son, but they never did, since they both traveled really far away. While their true location was never exactly said, I don't think it was Shurima, since Ezreal probably would have already found them if they were gone there. So my guess is that they left Shurima to explore the eastern part of Runeterra, which used to be the continent of Camivore, or one of the neighboring regions. Whatever it was, it said that Ezreal's parents got so caught up in what they were doing, they forgot to come back to their son. It was because of their negligent behavior that Ezreal's uncle didn't support his nephew going out on adventures and expeditions. Instead, he wanted to keep the kid from following in his parents' footsteps. During the show, Ezreal would have found both of his parents, but they'd eventually get separated again. While the distance would have been a relief, Ezreal would have eventually found them again. However, this time one of them, we don't know which one, was gonna die. The one who was left wouldn't have wanted to go home, just asking their son to stay. Unfortunately, Ezreal's wanderlust would have kicked in. Just like his parents, he would find the call of adventure too alluring and would simply leave the surviving parent behind. The last piece of info Matthew shared in his Twitter post was that we would see Ezreal becoming a dad. We don't know with whom, but the most obvious theory was with Lux. If you really want to stretch it, I guess it could have been with Kai'Sa. The final season would have an even more dramatic arc, where Ezreal would have chose between staying with the parent who survived or raising his kid, realizing he couldn't have both. Unfortunately, Ezreal would choose the wrong option, presumably going with the surviving parent, and that decision would lead to some event where he almost loses his own kid. In my opinion, Matthew's proposal wasn't completely bad. There were a lot of interesting points, but others say they were definitely pretty questionable. Like, okay, sure, there's a lot of story, but 7 seasons? Arcane had to do with 2 cute. And the second one even suffered because some arcs were way too rushed and certain points really needed a better explanation and development. It's not that Ezreal isn't an interesting or popular character, actually the opposite. He's actually one of the champions that gets and sells the most skins every single year. But 7 seasons is just insane. I think 1 or 2 would have been fine, maybe 3 at most. Of course, the biggest criticism the community had with the show was the fact that it was going to feature a female character just so she could have a kid with him. Like, Lux wouldn't have any focus at all, and would basically only existed as Ezreal's partner for the sole reason of giving him a kid. But she's a mage with insane elemental power, and she's got a really interesting story that's been developed a ton. She's basically like an ambassador in a city of freed mages in Demacia. I mean, it's basically the same issue brought up in the live-action Barbie movie, about how she had to love and end up with kin. Besides, Lux barely even knows Ezreal in the main universe, and she definitely doesn't love him. Of course, all of this is a narrative thing that can always be changed, but right now there's no Ezreal and Lux in canon. And yeah, to the disappointment of a lot of people, it's actually way more likely she ends up with Sylas in the future, even though the two of them already fought and he totally manipulated and used her. Same thing goes for Ezreal. After the Warriors cinematic, he and Kai'Sa started getting shipped by a ton of people, and honestly, there are way more people shipping those two than Ezreal and Lux. Plus, they've gotten way more natural connections and story interactions. And if you think it doesn't matter what the community ships, trust me, Riot has taken advantage of this kind of hype before to make money. Like with Twisted Fate, for example. He's an LGBT champ nowadays, but he used to be straight back in the early versions of League, where he even had a thing with Evelynn at the time. Their Tango skins actually reference a performance they did together back when they were a couple, before they split up. But ignoring the whole shipping talk aside, just because Riot ignored Matthew's proposals back then, doesn't mean they didn't keep some of his stuff to rework or reuse it at a later time. I'm saying this because Ezreal is already one of the characters introduced in this new Arcane retcon. The first confirmation came with Victor's updated biography after his rework. In it, we see a declaration called The Price of Progress. And at the very end of it, there's a note saying it was written by Professor Cristobal Lemire. And Lemire was the last name of Ezreal's uncle, who's also mentioned in Ezreal's own bio. I think you see where this is going. And if you don't think that's enough, don't forget that the Black Rose Ball skins are semi-canon. Basically, the skins show what the characters would have looked like if they had actually gone to that event in Nexus after receiving their invitations. So Renata, Samira, Vladimir, and even Ezreal all got invitations, but none of them replied or showed up. One fun detail about Ezreal's Black Rose Ball skin is that in the 4 original concepts for its splash art, you can see him watching Elise fight Katarina, or sneaking out of the ball, or having fun watching the 2 Noxians try to kill each other. The only one that's different is the one in the far right, where Ezreal is shown flirting with 2 girls while enjoying the fight. Now, honestly, in my opinion, an Ezreal series could definitely have arcs focusing on drama, especially around his parents, since a lot of his cocky, loud, annoying personality is basically just him covering up the void they left in his life. But it would also need to show some dangerous adventures that capture the essence and nostalgia of movies like Indiana Jones, The Mummy with Brendan Fraser, and even games like Uncharted. Not to mention, it would be really awesome to see an Ezreal series pulling from and mixing elements of 2 specific JoJo parts, which are Battle Tendency and Steel Ball Run, considering how many Rioters are hardcore nerds, geeks, and especially anime fans. It wouldn't be surprising at all if they added references or got inspiration from JoJo.
Oh? Instead of running away, you are coming closer. Funny, you have no idea how dead you're about to be.
I mean, League already has a ton of JoJo references anyways, and anyone who actually knows Ezreal understands that he's pretty much a mix of Joseph from Part 2 with Johnny and Gyro. Now, another thing that Riot could totally reuse is the cinematic that they never finished. While there was some work done on the project, it was eventually shelved and left in limbo. This cinematic was going to be called Enemy of My Enemy, and the premise was this. 2 sworn enemies discover a new respect for each other when they are forced to set their differences aside and work together against a common foe. This wasn't just a short cinematic. It was actually planned as a full animated feature film aimed at the audience between 18 and 30 years old. The main guy behind it was Leif Jeffers, a writer, director, and animator animator with over 20 years of animation experience. He worked at studios like Disney, DreamWorks, and Blue Sky. So yeah, this guy is no joke. Riot was clearly investing some serious money into this project, and if we already fell in love with Arcane's animation style made by Fortiche, just imagine something made by this guy. Oh, and before I reveal who those two enemies were, I want you to try to guess. You can even drop your guesses down in the comments and let's see who's right. The answer is Garen and Katarina. Based on the storyboard that was made, the story would have shown Garen with his men transporting a prisoner who was Katarina. They're in a rocky region that I couldn't really pinpoint. It kinda looks like the Shadow Isles because of the dark vibe, but it's definitely not there. Katarina is resisting arrest, and she starts an argument with Garen while they're crossing a rope bridge. By the look on her face, she's probably throwing some pretty heavy insults at him. It rattles him enough that she actually gets Garen to step closer to respond. Of course, she takes advantage to that and starts a fight, taking down a couple of his men. I couldn't tell if she was supposed to cut the bridge by stealing a soldier's sword, or she made it swing so much that the sudden movement snapped the ropes. Either way, everyone ends up falling into the ravine. Obviously, both Garen and Katarina survive the fall. She still has her hands bound, or maybe Garen manages to restrain her again, and he chains their hands together so Katarina won't try to escape again. But she's an assassin, right? She manages to get the upper hand on Garen and starts strangling him. And while that fight is happening, in the background, there's this creature that looks a lot like Indominus Rex from Jurassic World, who notices them and starts coming closer. From that point on, there's a clip showing the chase scene with the dinosaur-like monster hunting down Garen and Katarina. It even has voice acting and a soundtrack. Altogether, the clip is almost 3 minutes long, and it was made to represent the second act of the story. Apparently, Leif Jeffers was invited to present 2 scenes in this format to show off the movie's action and intensity. At the start of the chase, Katarina and Garen jump down a cliff, and she gets injured on her arm after hitting a rock. They quickly get back up and keep running to try to save themselves. Katarina takes the lead and tells Garen to follow her. At the bottom of this ravine, there are several abandoned houses and destroyed buildings. When they pass on one that has a door wide open, Garen pulls her inside to hide, and we get a full-on Jurassic Park style moment, with the monster putting its eye up to the doorway to peek inside to see if they're in there. It eventually leaves, and Garen takes the chance to grab a sword he finds among the rubble. They leave the house, but of course the creature notices and starts chasing them again. They manage to make it into another building though. The monster can't get through and just keeps roaring in frustration, slamming itself against the walls. Katarina's injury turns out to be worse than it looked, since she starts getting dizzy and weak, losing a lot of blood. Garen notices and tries to help her by giving her a piece of his shirt, but she collapses and passes out. When she wakes up, she realizes they're inside of what looks like a cathedral, and that bleeding on her arm has been stopped. Garen is sitting not too far away, sharpening the sword he found with the stone. Katarina asks him if the monster is gone, but Garen tells her that it's still outside waiting for them. She sighs and asks what they're gonna do, and Garen says that they'll just wait, because his men will come looking for them. Katarina asks if he's joking and calls him stupid. In response, he tells her to shut up and pulls their chain, knocking her to her knees and causing a noise. Outside the cathedral, the creature hears it and charges, smashing through the stained glass window and diving in to eat them. Garen pushes Katarina out of the way to save her, and the whole place collapses. Luckily, they manage to escape in time. Somehow, the dinosaur is still alive and keeps chasing them. They manage to climb onto a broken tower that's leaning against a wall of a cliff. The creature tries to smash the tower to knock them both down. At this point, Garen is badly hurt, and Katarina is basically carrying him. Realizing that the whole structure is about to fall apart and take them with it, he grabs Katarina and throws her upward, making her grab onto a tree branch growing out of the cliff wall. That leaves her hanging there, and she tries to use their chain to pull him up. Unfortunately, the chain can't take it and ends up snapping. Garen falls, and there's this intense exchange of emotional looks between him and Katarina. She then goes back to climbing up the cliff. As she gets closer to the top, she looks behind her and sees Garen at the bottom, holding his sword and getting ready to fight the dinosaur. Everything looks lost until she suddenly jumps back down, after we see her wielding 2 blades and fighting the monster alongside Garen. After an epic teamwork moment, they actually manage to kill it. I have no idea where she got those blades from, since all I know is that she jumped down, landed on him, and somehow pulled out those weapons to fight. But yeah, working together, they took the thing down. The last scenes show Garen and Katarina after climbing back up. They're in a more open area with some vegetation, looking out at a sea on the horizon with the sunlight getting brighter. They're leaning against a tree, out of breath, when we see Katarina using a piece of chain still on Garen's arm and her blade to tie him to the tree. She escapes with a smile, and he watches her vanish into the forest, also smiling. And that would have been Enemy of My Enemy. It was probably meant to explain the beginning of Garen and Katarina's relationship. It's actually actually really likely that a small piece of this unfinished movie was reused years later in the cinematic Before Glory, which came out during the Legends of Runeterra promo campaign, where each region got its own cinematic. So yeah, it wouldn't be impossible for Riot to reuse this material in future series involving Garen and Katarina. Riot always finds a way to recycle stuff they didn't finish. A lot of champions were literally born from the remnants of champs that were scrapped. And when it comes to media, it works the same way. Still talking about movies, a Variety report published on November 6, 2024, revealed that two very well-known filmmakers right now, Anthony and Joe Russo, the brothers responsible for Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, had actually been hired by Riot to produce a League movie. But things didn't move forward because of creative differences and bad deals. So the brothers ended up being let go. And not only that, Riot even paid them $5 million to walk away from the project. But neither Riot nor the Russo's production company ever made any official comment about this. Apparently, it was all leaked to Variety through anonymous sources close to Riot. Another more recent piece of news says that Riot is working on a live-action series with 9 episodes. Filming would take place on Cat Ba Island in Vietnam, starting at the end of 2025. And this was kind of revealed through a post on Facebook by the Vietnamese government, saying they weren't happy about it. If you think about it, only Ionia, the Shadow Isles, or Bilgewater would really fit an archipelago setting like that. Most people believe that Bilgewater is the most likely of those 3. Now, I'm not even sure if this news is true, so I'm already warning you guys about that. But let's say that there is something here. If that's true, then Riot has to be really careful about what they do with any new characters. For example, a major mistake would be giving the spotlight away to a brand new character who didn't even exist in the universe before the new show came out. The 2021 Mortal Kombat movie did something similar, inventing that young dude who's just super generic and lame. And it was so bad that in the second Mortal Kombat movie, he wasn't even the protagonist anymore. That spot went to Johnny Cage, played by Karl Urban, the same actor who plays the iconic Billy Butcher in The Boys. Anyways, back to the topic at hand, Bilgewater was the home of the first major community event, Burning Tides. Burning Tides showed Miss Fortune finally putting a years-long plan into motion, manipulating Twisted Fate and Graves and even killing Gangplank to take control of Bilgewater. For a while, GP was actually disabled in the game, and the client showed a notification that he was dead, not only for him to come back later with a new look. In fact, his old design, which had already been reworked, was turned into the Captain Gangplank skin, showing him before Miss Fortune took him down, and the Captain Fortune skin shows her look during that event, which later became her official canon appearance. You can see her updated design in her comic Fortune Smiles, as well as in Tales of Runeterra, a Bilgewater animated short called Double Double Cross, and newer stuff like the Rune King game. It's just a shame they never updated her base look in League. Anyway, if we do get a Bilgewater live action series, it's pretty likely we'll see a brand new champion being introduced in the story and later added into the game. Kinda like what they did with Ambessa and Arcane. But that's basically it. See you guys in the next video.